Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. It's nice to see you all. And yeah, so last week we were doing, I think we were just doing kind of like a one-off, if I remember, kind of some pointing out instructions and then moving on into some Mahamudra. I was teaching from Shabkar's Flight of the Garuda on Saturday, and then was following up with somebody uh, about one of the songs. And I usually teach like from this paper, small paperback version of Flight of the Garuda. It was translated by Art Kunzang, which is now out of print. And um, like I got it at some point, like in the mid 90s. So I was looking through this PDF, and this is all for a reason why I'm explaining the story. And there is a whole text in the PDF version of this book that is not in this print book. And it is the text of Karma Chagme's Union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And so I would like to transition as skillfully right into that text, because it's a beautiful text. And the first Karma Chagme Rinpoche Ragase was really a dynamic teacher. He was it's kind of an interesting situation. He was like the much older friend of Mingyur Dorje, who was this young brilliant Turton who revealed the Namcha Terma cycle, around which like Namcha Amitabha is central. And so Mingyur Dorje was like, what we would say the first Mingyur Rinpoche. Right. And so Mingyur Rinpoche is super well known right now. And this text in particular is a beautiful way of bringing together actually three things, right? One is Mahamudra, one is Dzogchen, which we obviously know from the title, but the third is deity yoga in the form of Chinrezi, the Bodhisattva of compassion. So I'm going to, I will email Eric this PDF, and then after the class, and then that could be available for folks. But for now, I'll just kind of read and go read and offer commentary. But before we do, let's just take a little moment to sit, just about 4 minutes as a way of settling, allowing your body to settle like a mountain. So with this experience of stillness and gravity, letting your breath be very relaxed, right? Let it be whatever it is that your body needs right now. Don't worry about whether it's fast or slow. It is what it is. Let your eyes be the gateway to open, vast oceanic space. Supple, free, non-labeling, non-projecting awareness. Let your mind also be relaxed, like a mountain stream, letting all that arises come and go as it does. We'll sit like this for 4 minutes. And gently bring yourself back to this group. All right. Okay, so I received the instructions and actually transmission for this text from the previous Karma Chakme Rinpoche, interestingly enough, who happened to be passing through New York City in, it was either 1998 or 1999. And he was at Tibet House, and it was kind of crazy. There must have been like 5 people there. It was like this very intimate setting. And then later in 2006, I went to Nepal with my oldest son, Pico, and we went to go visit the previous Karma Chakme Rinpoche at his monastery, which was, it was in the process of being built in Parping. And I was able to receive the Namcha Amitabha sadhana from him. It was a really lovely, at that time, very elderly teacher who he died, I want to say, as best as I remember, somewhere around like 2014 or 2015. He died in, I believe it was New Delhi. Very sad to these great masters of that generation in particular were so rare and unique. But so anyway, this text begins. So it's the Union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, the direct instructions of the Great Compassionate One by Karma Chagme Rinpoche the First. And so this reference to the Great Compassionate One is a direct reference to Avalokiteshvara Richenrezi himself. And so he begins, and this is also a series of songs, each chapter. So we'll probably be able to go through the first 2, maybe even 3 today, but we'll see. So it begins with Namo Mahakarunikaye. So Namo Mahakarunaka, or Namo Avalokiteshvara, right, or great compassion. And the first song is called Summarizing the Profound Teachings. And Karma Chagme says, Emaho, the sutras, tantras, and philosophical scriptures are extensive and great in number, but life is short and intelligence is limited, so it is hard to cover them completely. You may know a lot, but if you don't put it into practice, it's like dying of thirst on the bank of a great lake. Likewise, it sometimes happens that a common corpse is found in the bed of a great scholar. And so, the 3 major vehicles of the Buddhist tradition, the Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana, are huge. Right? There's so much, so much. And it might not necessarily seem like there is a lot, because in English, not a lot of this has been translated. It's said that somewhere at best, perhaps 5% of the Vajrayana corpus has been translated into English. Right? So we may think we know a lot, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, as it were. And we don't need to like eat the whole iceberg or melt a whole iceberg and into water and drink the whole thing. We just need enough to transform our mind. And life is short. I know there are people here in this meeting together who are older than I, but boy, it goes fast. Right? And so life is short. It's kind of speeding by. Our lives are very busy. If it's not the daily grind of our lives that contribute to this sense of busyness, it's also the sense of overwhelm with respect to everything that's going on in the world. So it's hard. It's hard for us to perhaps condense everything we may be interested in learning. And he goes on by saying that even if you know a lot, if you don't put it into practice, it's worthless, right? And so this is something that so Trungpa Rinpoche coined the term spiritual materialism. It's a really great way of describing this the constant hustle and bustle of the spiritual marketplace, going from more of this, more of that, more Dharma instruction, more changing out meditation instructions willy-nilly. It's important to focus, right? It's important to master something, right? At the very least, it's important to try to master our own mind. If we can't, we will find ourselves at some point on our deathbed, and the question is, how what is our relationship to peace and easefulness then, right? And this is what we should be practicing for. We should be practicing because we're all going to die, right? That is inevitable. Doesn't matter how old we are, doesn't matter how privileged we are, doesn't matter, all of these things. The wealthy die, those with few resources die. The very educated die, those without the means to connect to education or the support to connect to education, they also die. Right? This is our and not to be all intense about it, but this is kind of the reality of the situation. So he goes on to say the scriptures of the sutras and the tantras and the words of the learned and accomplished ones of India and Tibet all have great blessings, but are difficult for the ordinary person to grasp. Though they are indispensable for teaching in a monastic college, for one-pointed practice they are of little use. This pointing out instruction of the old lady is more beneficial for your mind than all of the others. Right, so I definitely can claim with great love and joy that I have not been colonized by higher education because I do not hold an advanced degree. And so many Buddhists in the US, at least, are, have these advanced degrees. Right? They have, their minds have been thoroughly colonized and conquered. Right? And part of this colonization is this expectation that I need a lot. I need all of this Dharma. I need, so much. And if I don't have all of this, I'm just, some worthless little Dharma peon practitioner. And it's important to remember too that the exact year that Karma Chagme lived, I want to say maybe the 1400s, 1500s, 1400s. So he's writing this in Tibet. Then the scriptures of the sutras and tantras and the words of the learned and accomplished ones of India and Tibet all have great blessings, but are difficult for ordinary people to grasp. So even then, it's like, whoa, man, this is a lot. There is a lot of stuff here. And it is difficult for all of us to master. And, being in my seat, I will see this, very intimately. Sometimes it's hard for people to grasp, just a little bit of this, right? But the point is that it's not about grasping as much as you can or having this incredible intellect or having this huge knowledge base or even knowing languages, right? Knowing Tibetan, Sanskrit, even that's not important, right? It's important if we're going to, develop a monastic college, he says, right? It's important for that, right? But for one-pointed practice, these things are of little use, right? To liberate our minds, to liberate our heart, this is of little use. And this pointing out instruction of the old lady, which is what he's describing his this series of songs, is more beneficial for your mind than all the others. He goes on to say, all the innumerable and profound teachings, such as Mahamudra and Dzogchen, which are decisive and unmistaken in each root text, are indispensable when teaching disciples who will hold the Dharma lineages. But for personal practice, for the sake of the future, it is more profound to condense them all into one. Right? And so we can, oh yes, thank you. 1600s. And so we can concern ourselves with incredible specificity, learning all of these different cycles of Dzogchen, all of these different approaches to Mahamudra, and become, like an aficionado, or an expert. And again, that's not particularly useful either. Right? Yeah, it's great if you got it, right? But if you don't have it, don't worry, right? No worries. For personal practice, for the sake of the future, it is more profound to condense them all into one. Right? To grasp precisely and unmistakably the various traditions of the Dharma, it is necessary for upholding the doctrinal teachings. But if you are concerned with the welfare of your future, it is more profound to train in being non-sectarian, seeing all of them as pure. Right? So again, if, any of us here, everybody gathered here, all 20 of us, are going to be upholding some, monastic college or curriculum. We're all joining together to make some monastery, which would be very unpleasant. It's important to kind of gather all of this stuff, right? But if we're only concerned about our future, our spiritual future, maybe the spiritual future of those who are close to us in our communities, people we work with and serve, etc., it's more profound to train in being non-sectarian, seeing them all as pure. And we can really break this non-sectarian view out even more, like fan it out, right? Non-judgmental with respect to appearance, period. Seeing everything as pure. It is necessary, if it is necessary to focus your mind on one single sufficient master, if you are to be their chief disciple. But if you wish to have the virtues of experience and realization dawn within you, it is more profound to combine all the teachers that you have met into one, and to visualize them as the Buddha resting on the crown of your head, and to supplicate him or her or them. Right? And so, again, if it is our karma to be the heart son or heart daughter or heart person of a particular lineage master, and that is what our work is, then yes, we should, be fervent in our single-pointed reception, like holding a big basket, holding everything that they have to give, right? But in our case, right, we can receive Dharma instruction from many, many, many teachers, right? And then we can also just visualize them all combined as the Buddha. Right? So this is basically his saying, it's okay to get around a little bit. You don't have to worry so much about keeping everything super monogamous. He says, the different recitations for various development stage practices, like different deity practices, Shinrezi, for example, or Medicine Buddha, which Rod so skillfully, has introduced to Bhumisparsha, of numerous Yidam deities in the sections of Tantra are indispensable if you're going to be giving empowerments as a great master. But as a means for purifying your own obscurations and attaining accomplishment, it is more profound to practice one deity in mantra, which includes all of them. Right? So again, if somebody's going to be a major lineage holder and you need to receive all of these different things and practice all of these different things so that you can then transmit all of these things to others, that's one thing, right? But for our own liberation, it's suitable, and at times we could even say preferable, to just practice one thing and blend them all in together, right? So Karma Chagmin is really making this argument for simplicity. And again, our conditioning, especially for those of us here who have advanced degrees, I feel sorry for you, because your desire is for more and more complexity. May it be more rare, more bizarre, more outlandish, more less commonplace, right? Not what the commoner practices. I want the the super ivory tower, exclusive club of practice, right? He says no, as a means for purifying your own obscurations and attaining accomplishment, it is more profound to practice one deity and mantra, which includes all of them, right? So, kind of vibe off of Lama Rudd's, bringing Medicine Buddha and Shinrezi to Bhumisparsha. And, we could, if we wanted to, get into this big heated argument, like, which one is more profound, right? Which mantra is better, right? And then if we added Rachel Wooten, and then all of a sudden now we're adding Tara, right? Oh, this is like, or if we're going to add Chu or the protectors, then it's like, which one is better? And the whole point is just do what your heart connects to, and that is the best, right? There is no, this is not about titrating or creating a tiered system. Whatever is unlocking this experience of openness and profound, interconnectedness in your heart is the thing to practice. So then he goes on to say, the innumerable practices of the completion stage, with and without reference point. So this kind of has to do with the different kinds of yogic practices and Mahamudra and Dzogchen, are indispensable for expounding the innumerable meditation manuals. But as a means for virtues of experience and realization to dawn within you, it is more profound to sustain the essence, which is the embodiment of them all. So again, if each one of us are going to try to leave behind, when we die, commentaries on every single kind of completion stage practice, then get to it, man. Like, do that work, right? But for us who are just trying to, maybe, die in a relatively decent way, right? And, with a little bit more awareness than we have now, right? Or maybe all the awareness there is to be experienced within the context of Rigpa. Practicing in the simple way, right? Practice the one, practice the two. If there are two, try to make them one. Really try to be simple, right? If all of you could be here in my apartment and you could see all of the books that I own, it is ridiculous. And I don't say this with pride, it's more kind of like an illness. And if I were, laying on my deathbed, I can't even like lay on my bed and kind of figure out what book I want to look at because there are too many, and so many are so good. So what do I do? Right? That's a problem, right? So to have that one or those two and be like, oh, that is it, right? That is it. My root teacher told me at some point early on, she was like, Justin, like you just need one non-conceptual practice, one guru yoga practice, one protector and one yidam, and you could also combine like the yidam and the protector. Like, so her yidam was 6-hour Mahakala, which is also a protector, right? So she cut it even more simply. But her whole point was like, don't end up carrying all this stuff. Because then, it's like, oh, I'm going to sit down to practice. And it's like, okay, now what am I going to practice? Am I going to be non-conceptual, or am I going to do protector practice? Or am I going to do blah, 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 or this or that, right? The thing is, it's all the experience of mind is what we're looking for, right? So while this might, somebody could easily say, wow, this is so boring in elementary. Why am I sitting here listening to Justin read this, like, yammering thing? But in here is a really profound kind of pointing out around how to relate to practice. And what he's pointing out, Karma Chugmi is pointing out, is relating to practice in the simplest, most relaxed terms, right? Which for folks like us, most of which here, I believe, myself included, are all coming to this, as converts, right? That's a little hard to do, right? Within this kind of comfort mentality, we want, we can get a lot of zeal in our system sometimes, right? And we can, sometimes, like my kids, order with our eyes, right? When we go to restaurants, and he's saying to slow down a little bit. So then Karma Chugme goes on to say, there are many ways of demonstrating the view, such as cutting through fabrications from outside and from within. But just as smoke vanishes when the flames in a fireplace are extinguished, it is more profound to cut through the root of mind. I really like this stanza quite a bit because this is it. Just cutting through the root of mind. So simple. And then, some people will reach out and they'll say, well, what about the view we find in Che? Or what about the view we find in this? Or the view here? Or the view there? And there are endless views, endless applications of the view, right? Just bringing it to this experience in the moment, wherever we are. So myself, sitting at home in Brooklyn, bringing the view to being here on a Zoom call with all of you, period. Not complex, always appropriate. This is like a magical garment that we can wear everywhere. Perhaps always fashionable, always comfortable, right? Always on point, always applicable. That's this view of cutting through the root of mind is, as long as you're alive, no matter where you find your physical body, it is applicable. It could be free as a bird. You could find yourself in a detention center. You could find yourself on your deathbed. You could find yourself newly born. You could find yourself just hanging back, painting your fingernails. It's all good, right? It is all okay. Although there are numerous meditation techniques, both with and without concepts, it is more profound to practice the unity of luminosity and emptiness, the development stage completed by mere recollection. Right? And so here he's getting a little technical. Right? Although there's all sorts of things we can learn, so many different ways. With concepts, without concepts. The most profound thing is this practice of the unity of luminosity and emptiness, which is the unity of the direct experience of all phenomenon. Right? So if you stop, looking at me and just look up, wherever you happen to be at home or wherever, and just behold, rest your gaze. Right, this experience of luminosity is the constant occurrence. There's visual culture, there's auditory culture, there's olfactory culture, there's tactile culture, there's mental, emotional culture. All of these things are happening. Right, and this is how it is luminous. It is luminous by the constancy of this experience of phenomena. And the emptiness piece of this dawns from this recognition that everything happens to be, but lacks any particular self-nature that is not a product of our own labeling, projection, imputation, etc. Right? So what he is saying is that the most important practice, if we have to have one, is to be able to rest in direct experience with everything that arises, in all the ways that everything does arise, in such a way that it arises and it can be liberated on the spot by us not doing anything. Right? So taking a moment to look at all the people on this call, all these boxes. Right? So I'm going to look at everybody, right? And take a moment, if you can do the same thing, and look without labeling, look without judging, look without projecting, look without, Gendon in his, handkerchief on his head, I know what that's all about. Right? And then Albert with his fabulous scarf. And Dan with Dan's scarf. Right? I know what that's all about. Right? And Rodrigo smiling. And for me, all the people on the bottom row you can't see. So to look and behold without label, without, in one way you could say without the violence of making things into what we think they are, right? And just let everything be what it is. right? Just let everything be as it is. The same way we all want to be left to be who we are, whatever that is, or what we are, who knows. So the luminosity aspect is the constant, ooh, all this play, all this form, all this color, right? The constancy of it. So I'm in Brooklyn and there's all sorts of craziness always going on outside, right where I am. So there's that. But I don't need to label crazy. I don't need to label busy. I don't need to label, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'd rather be in a cave somewhere. No, just let it all be. And so this, right, is the most profound thing to practice, the unity of luminosity and emptiness. And this is the development stage completed by mere recollection, just by settling right into this. Although there are numerous kinds of behavior, high and low, coarse and precise, it is more profound to exert yourself as much as you can in practicing virtue and abandoning evil deeds. I'm sorry for anybody who's here just to experience non-duality, so you can just do whatever you want. It's funny. I was there's this great Dzogchen master I really like, named Jatsen Ningpo, who was he was he was great. He was a teacher of the 10th Karmapa, and this person, Latsen Jigme Namgyal, who was this kind of crazy yogi who went from Tibet to Sikkim in the 1400s and was just he revealed this terma cycle, with the name of which is eluding me right now, but it's like he discovered it in Sikkim, and in Sikkim there's a lot of pride around this because that's basically like a Sikkimese term, like Hatha Yoga cycle. But anyway, his teacher was Jatsen Ningpo, and Jatsen Ningpo was a great Turton. He achieved rainbow body, and he was a monk. And the thing I love about him is that he was a monk. I don't want to be a monk particularly. I went through that. I almost became a monk. But what I love about his being a monk is his sealing this like profound experience of non-duality with the skillfulness of the ethics of the monastic tradition. Like, I think that is really, these days everybody wants to touch into non-duality so they can sleep with whoever they want, or they can drink all they want, all this stuff, right? Like, I can act as crazy as I want. I can, be a proponent of crazy wisdom. But how incredible that, Jatsen Ningpo was able to hold that essence of non-duality, but held within the container of, the discipline of ordained Sangha. That to me is quite special, right? And so this is what Karma Chugmi is kind of pointing out as well, right? Like, yes, we all want to get our freak on, through non-dual practices. I get that, but it's better, right? It's more profound to exert ourselves as much as we can in practicing virtue and abandoning evil deeds. And this doesn't mean, we have to get all like hardcore Protestant on ourselves and everything else. Really, we can read the abandonment of evil deeds and the practicing of virtue as being a kind, compassionate presence, right? And especially taking this view of the union of luminosity and emptiness to its full conclusion, right? Which means I don't need to give birth to everything that I see, I hear. I can just let everyone be themselves. I can let everything be itself. Right? I can be a positive presence for things, but the world around me was not made for my constant reification of it. Right? It was here before I was born. It will be here after I die. And what a beautiful thing, right? To just work towards that. And he says, although numerous things have been taught about attainment the time of reaching fruition, it is more profound to possess the definite certainty of attainment after having practiced unmistakably the view, meditation, and action. And so, everybody's obsessed. This is kind of what he said. I'm paraphrasing Karma Chagme. Everybody's obsessed with the end point, the goal. What's going to look like? What's the party going to be like when I get enlightened? Who's going to be there? Who's not going to be there? Like, what's the outfit going to be? Who's going to be, my sponsor? Like what jewelry company is going to do my crown, my bangles, and all this stuff. If I wear bone ornaments, whose bones are they going to be? Someone cool, definitely. Right. So rather than be all obsessed with the goal, right, practice methodically. Just practice in the moment. Practice the view in the moment constantly. Right. No matter how. I remember, when I was going, I found out I was going to be a dad. I was actually up in Darjeeling, and my eldest son's mother was in Bodh Gaya, and I was like stunned beyond belief and excited. And so I went down from the Darjeeling area to Bodh Gaya for us to kind of like talk all this through and figure it all out. And I had this friend who we were doing we were circumambulating the stupa, doing kora together, like around the stupa in Bodh Gaya. And my friend turned to me and he was like, "Man, you had a really good shot. And now you're going to be a dad and it's all over. You could have been something. But if you really practice a lot of merit in your next life, it'll really be, you really have a good shot." I was like trying not to hit him, as we were doing Kora. I was just like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me, man? Like, where did you come from? Like, someone was your parent. Like, right? All great practitioners, of every single stripe had parents who gave birth to them and, cared for them and wiped their butt and, was patient with them when they had temper tantrums and all of this stuff, right? And as much as we don't like to think about, oh yeah, I had temper tantrums and I pooped all over myself and all this stuff and these other people were here, right? I was really disturbed when I heard that, not because I thought or felt that, but I was disturbed by this person's view. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Right? That does not make any sense. Right? And so this point about practicing no matter where we are. And that's what I tried to do. I was young. My oldest son, actually, tomorrow's his birthday, and he's going to turn 24. I'm 48. So I was 24 when he was born, kind of like a young baby. And I, especially those early years of his life, I was up at 4 a.m. every morning to practice. I practiced usually 2.5 hours before work. And then I would help out, with getting him ready, or my partner, helping her out. And then I would come, go work, come home, would cook, all this kind of stuff, do practice in the evening, right? And try to practice on the subway going to work and trying to practice at work. This is what Karma Chagme is saying. He's like, yeah, like we all want to see, we want to wonder like how high the throne is going to be that we get when we're awakened. All this kind of stuff. All the songs people are going to sing about how incredible we are. But we really just have to practice moment by moment, right? Even like, with my son's eldest son's mother, our relationship didn't last, right? So then it was practicing through that falling apart, right? And the tumultuousness of going through that. And then the joy of meeting another partner and then having more kids. And then, and then the vicissitudes of navigating life, with other people. Right. So this is all we have, really. And I know there are a lot of folks on this call from New Zealand, and I'm jealous because he probably might not have the same kind of view as us. But in America, we tend to always think of everything in terms of like the movie that's going to be made about our lives and who's going to play us and all this kind of stuff. Like who's going to narrate, you know, the movie, you know, all this kind of stuff. Right. And so Karma Chugmi is just like slow down, right? It is in every single moment, even the most boring moments, even the most broken moments, right? That's all we ever have, the most plain moments, you know. I led this, this death and dying retreat a couple of weeks ago in LA, and it was time for the tsok, and at this place, this retreat center, the tsoks can be a lot of fun. But all of a sudden, I realized I was surrounded by much younger people. And I felt so old that I left early to go to bed early. And it was a funny feeling. I was like, oh, now I'm like boring. Well, okay, fine. I'll practice with boring, you know? And it was great. Went to sleep early. It was nice. Right. So no matter where we are in life, like we just practice with whatever we have. Right. That's, you know, and the beautiful thing is that's enough. Like that is enough. Right. We always want more, but what we have is enough. And so then Karma Chugmi says, although bodhisattvas who have accomplished the levels are not obscured even by severe wrongdoing or misdeeds done for the sake of the teachings, since people like us have to fear the lower realms, it is more profound to shun without involvement wrongdoing and severe faults. Right. And so here too, you know, sometimes people, this is actually quite common, you know, people motivated with this kind of, you know, bodhisattva vow activity of I'm going to make the world a better place, I'm going to alleviate everybody's suffering, is beautiful and noble. And bodhisattvas have the ability to be able to show up sometimes in a fierce way, right? That's, you know, appropriate to the moment to help provide support and liberate people. And for people like me, I'll just use myself, like, you know, who are lazy, then, you know, we might get all, you know, hot and bothered and intense thinking we're bodhisattvas, but we're really just sowing discord everywhere, right? Making everybody's life miserable. And because we think we're so great, right, we forget the consequences of our actions, right? So I've seen this definitely play out in places like where there are these big empowerments going, especially for protector practices. And people are like, oh yeah, I love protector practices because I love, like, you know, telling people like it is, like, you know, how it is and how they should be and what should happen, and you know, tell it to people straight and be rough and all this stuff. And the point isn't that, right? Especially if you don't have the skill to understand your impact, right? Right. So Karma Chugmi is again kind of pushing us back to remember your impact on others, right? Just as much as it would feel great to open a can of whoop ass on somebody, right? That's not always going to lead to the desired outcome, right? It's not going to help, right? And then ultimately, we are the ones who are going to have to deal with the repercussions of this. And then he finishes the song by saying, moreover, without self-interest and for the general benefit of beings, it is profound to seal your practices, such as offering and giving, copying teachings, and reciting texts, with a dedication free from conceptualizing the three spheres. So basically, conceptualizing the three spheres has to do with really conceptualizing everything or anything at all, right? So he said, again, this is written in the 1600s. So when he says it is profound to seal your practices such as offering and giving, copying teachings, and reciting texts, there's a lot in kind of traditional like Indic and Tibetan based Vajrayana practices around the accumulation of merit through the recitation of text, right? So like the Heart Sutra is a good version, a good example of this, from both the Mahayana and the Vajrayana perspective. The recitation of the Heart Sutra, it's said that, you know, it benefits the person who recites it, It benefits the person for whom it's being recited, but it also benefits the environment, right? To recite the Heart Sutra, here in South Brooklyn, is to bless Bay Ridge, right? And Lord knows Bay Ridge could use some of that sometimes. And so reciting, right? But even copying out texts. So this Flight of the Garuda, like I only bought after I met my root teacher. When I met my root teacher, she made me copy this entire thing by hand. She's like, I'll teach you Flight of the Garuda, but first you need to copy the whole thing out, right? And if anybody has ever done something like this, before I met her, I spent a summer in Scotland transcribing early English manuscripts on alchemy. And so basically I spent 3 months copying out these early English books, ye shall, with an E at the end of the shall, transmute, and all the spelling was all weird. Mercury into gold by this, technique. And there's this level of absorption that is so much more profound when you actually copy something out. And maybe I think we used to do this when we were younger, like folks my age and older, right? Like in school, you would have to copy things out, right? Nowadays, like nobody copies anything out, nobody knows anything anymore. But so Karma Chagme was like, when you do that, when you recite texts, the other thing that might sound a little strange, maybe in a kind of Western materialist kind of milieu, is another thing that was really a type of merit producing activity that was valued was sponsoring the creation of statues, right? So or the building of monasteries or stupas or this kind of thing. And so I had the opportunity of like helping to sponsor like a life-size Vajrayogini statue made for a nunnery in Sikkim. And my Dharma sister told me how much it would cost, and I was like, oh my God, really? Like, and it's like I'm a young dad. I don't have money. But then I was like, oh, like just like Karma Chagme said, seal this, right, with pure intention, right? Don't, and I wasn't thinking like, I wonder how much like merit I'm going to be getting for this. Right. So to not be, small-minded in that way. A funny kind of story. As a little bit of a I connected to Vajrayana, I believe, quite a bit because of its art. My father is an artist, and so taking me to museums all the time here in New York, and I was able to acquire a late 19th century, so Sino-Tibetan, so Chinese Tibetan statue of the Bodhisattva of long life, Amitayus, that was authentic, to that time period. And I, at one point, was coming back from India, and the Siddha Rinpoche he ran into those political problems, and he was in exile from India, and he was staying in upstate New York. And Boka Rinpoche had found out. He was like, "Oh, will you deliver this letter to Siddha Rinpoche on your way back?" And I was like, "Of course," So got home from the airport, picked up the statue of Amitayus. I was like, I'm going to offer this to Siddha Rinpoche. What a great thing to offer this statue of long life to one of the heart sons of 16th Karmapa. And so I did, delivered the letter, offered him the statue. And like 2 years later, I saw an auction catalog for this statue in the same series. Because, back in the late 1800s, they would produce like 150 of these or whatever. And it sold for $25,000. And there's part of me that was like, oh, and then another part of me was like, oh, merit, like tight and loose at the same time, right? So be loose, don't worry so much. Seal everything or apply this dedication free of all conceptualizing, and dedicate everything we do to the benefit of beings, right? Rather than our own self-interest. So that was the first song. So maybe we'll move right into the next, and then we can make some time for any questions people might have. So song 2 is called "Taking Advantage of the Difficult to Find Human Body." So he begins with Ke Maho. There are many aeons, but it is rare that the sacred teachings flourish. Right, so there are many time periods, and the Tibetans, get their sense of or time or concepts of time from India, and so there's a very kind of sophisticated use of the term aeon. And if I remember correctly, an aeon is a period of time with a 1 and 18 zeros. Like that's one aeon, and so Karma Chagme begins by saying that there are many aeons, but it is rare to find one in which the sacred teachings flourish. Right. So one thing, right, to find a time when the teachings flourish is rare. And then he says there are many realms, but it is rare that a Buddha appears. Right. So there are many different ways in which we arise, and so we could say the 6 realms. So there's the God's realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and then the hot and cold hells. Right? So not always do Buddhas appear in all of those. And then he says, among the 6 kinds of beings, right, the beings of all of these different realms, it is rare to obtain a human form. And so, I'll say some of this stuff is definitely like hominoid centric or human centric. But again, we're human. Well, this is how we communicate, interact with Dharma, etc. And so it is rare, right? And I don't see many non-human. I mean, there could be ghosts I'm not seeing, but there are all sorts of beings, right? There are fish, there are all sorts of insects, there are cows and ducks and birds of every kind, right? And all of them don't necessarily have the opportunity to learn about Dharma, right? Is what he's saying. So this is rare, right? It's rare that we have this opportunity. And some of this stuff, we need to kind of idiomatically translate, into our own, way of approaching this. So then he's also kind of this next stanza is really about kind of the idea of around geography that they had. So within the context of the Indo-Tibetan tradition, it was believed that there were 4 continents, around this kind of mystical mountain called Mount Meru. And Dharma was not always found in each of these continents. So he says, among the 4 continents, it is rare to be born in Jambudvipa, right, which is the continent, our continent, as it were, this realm. And within Jambudvipa, it is rare that the sacred Dharma flourishes. Although one is born here, it is rare to have all of our senses intact. Although one may not have all of their senses, it is rare to have any thought of the perfect Dharma. Right. So again, this is just how to hear this in another way is just the preciousness of how we come to connect to Dharma. Right. And all we need to do really is close our eyes for a moment and feel into the journey that got us here. Right. And how unique that is. And so for each one of us, it's not like we were born and all of a sudden there was someone who was like, here's the Dharma, right? We all came to it in pretty interesting ways, I would venture to bet. And some contexts, painful ways too, right? Through our suffering, right? And how rare and amazing that was able to happen. And then he goes on to say, although one wishes to practice, it is rare to find a qualified teacher. Right? I know you guys are still looking. right? Still looking. It is rare to find, I don't even know. It is rare. Even though one may meet one, it is rare to receive instructions on practice. Oh, this is true. Like there's this one one teacher. I thought we had we had a good connection, right? But I thought we had a particular kind of connection. So there's one particular thing I wanted to learn from this teacher in Sikkim. He taught me what he was a specialist in, which I'm very grateful for. But being hard headed, I was like, no, I want you to teach me what I want to know. And we definitely did not have that connection because he was not having it. Right. So it's possible to meet all sorts of teachers, right? But it is more rare to receive Dharma from them, right? So but even though one may receive Dharma instruction, it is rare to be ripened through the empowerments, right? And so it's easy, whatever. It's easy to get a little bit of Dharma. It's hard to receive empowerments and all this kind of stuff, and then receive them from somebody with whom you have a real heartfelt connection, right? And to feel these empowerments ripening the latent awakening, which is what an empowerment is. So an empowerment or initiation ceremony is really in essence the planting of a very profoundly fertile seed of awakening within the mind stream of the person who's receiving it. And that latency is there, but it is up to each one of us to do the work to cause this thing to grow, right? Otherwise, everybody would just get enlightened at every big, empowerment ceremony. So the gateway is opened, and then we need to step in and start doing the work. Right? But it is rare even to have the causes and conditions for this gateway to be laid through empowerment. And then he says, although these may come together, it's rare to recognize one's essence, right? It is rare to recognize the nature of mind. Right? It is rare to recognize Rigpa. Right? So he's really like pointing out the reality of the situation. And we could all be doing other things. We could be, hop on a plane and go to Cancun. We could all be on the beach somewhere drinking pina coladas, or we could be in a casino somewhere, or like with Eric, we could go to the racetracks. We could do all sorts of things, right? But instead, we're here doing this. And so then he says, all these rarities you have now obtained, right? So all of us, by virtue of being here together, right? This is a demonstration of all of us having all of these things, right? This rare combination. Right? This is not an easy thing, he says. It is the result of aspirations from former lives. So now, turn your back on samsara. Right? So we wouldn't be here if we hadn't have made past aspirations. But even more than that, we wouldn't be here if we hadn't had a past relationship to this. Right? So, is it Kyra Jewell, I think her latest book was called, We're Made for These Times, right? I think, yeah. And this is something that, I think I plagiarized that by saying Lama Rod was made for these times in my endorsement for his book, which hopefully everybody is going to go out and buy, The New Saints. And we were all made for these times because of previous relationship to Dharma. You can't be here without that. And it's not because I'm a gatekeeper who's like, you can't be here without that, or get out. It's more, the causal, factors are this way. Right. And believe me, I had this one teacher, Pating Rinpoche, is very, 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 very wonderful, very old, incredible practitioner, super old school, super old world. And he only had two Western students, myself and my Dharma brother, Eric, who grew up in suburban Virginia. And so at one point, he and I were there with Padang Rinpoche in his retreat place. We had just spent time in this cave that he had spent 40 years of meditation in. And there's so much time he had spent that the rock was worn smooth, like where he had done retreat. Because at first I was like, oh yeah, all these people, like, they exaggerate stuff. But we got into the cave and I saw how smooth the rock was. I was like, okay, like it was polished, from his behind. And at one point I was like, how in the world does someone from, suburban Virginia and then someone who grew up in Lower Manhattan, like, end up here with this person, And we asked that to Padre Rinpoche. He's like, he's like, you idiots, like, it's called karma. Like, we've been here before. We've done this. You don't seem to remember, but I do. So it's my job to kind of smack you around a little bit until you remember. Right? But so this is all of us. We've been here before. My root teacher used to say before she died, she was like, you better practice everything I taught because I'm going to need you to teach it back to me, right? When we meet next, right? And when I'm in my next form, whatever that is. Right? So this, right? Like, and I really do think it's helpful and healthy for us to try to not only turn our back on samsara, but begin to turn our back on some of this kind of overly conceptual, rationalist way of thinking that we've all been trained to espouse, through the way we've been educated. Like we can afford to be a little magical in our thinking. That's okay. So then he goes on to say, if you're unable to do that, you will for certain be nothing more than someone returning empty-handed from an island of precious jewels. There's only the slightest possibility that such conditions will come together in the future. Right? So he's like, if you can't make it here, you're not going to be able to make it anywhere. Right? Like, this is so unique. Right? This is not going to be able to be recreated necessarily. Okay? So what are we doing? And I don't mean this like, what are you doing? But I mean, what are we doing? Because we're all in this together and we're all different and we're all in different circumstances and our lives are all different. So what are we going to do? Like, we could either say, this is okay, but like, yeah, maybe, blah, 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 blah. Maybe I want more comfort. I want more power. I want more money. I want more real estate. I want more fame. I want more da 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 da, and yeah, we'd give it all up, and that's risky. It's really risky. We need to seize this moment. It's all we have. Then he says, in particular, the secret mantra, the unexcelled Vajrayana, will not be taught by the 1,000 Buddhas beginning with Maitreya. So there is no other hope of receiving it. So this is interesting too. So this is kind of predicated on this belief that Vajrayana is very unique just to these times, right? And that, so Maitreya is the next Buddha, the future Buddha, right? The next Buddha is like going to teach something else, right? So if this is what we want to know or learn or practice, like, this is like, we need to take advantage of this, right? So like I mentioned, I'm 48 and I've been trying to take advantage of this, since I was, I don't know, 19 or 19, yeah, 19 and or 20. And I don't want to stop. Like, this really has to be, give it my all kind of thing, right? Not to sound all corny, right? But like, we just have to try. Like, if we don't try, like, we can't. I feel like I'm it's like telling my kids, one of my sons really doesn't like eating vegetables, and I feel like that's what I'm saying. It's like, eat your vegetables. We should all eat our vegetables. Very important. If you have now obtained this precious human form, which is so difficult to find, if you don't make use of this, it will be abandoned and discarded in no time, only to be eaten by birds and dogs or cremated by fire. So take advantage of this now. Otherwise, it is pointless. So there's the Jewish grandmother. If I had a good Vajra child, they would get enlightened and make me proud. Right? But really, before we know it, and again, a lot of people have heard me say this, but I used to work as a hospice chaplain, and it was so humbling to hear this resounding, but the constancy of hearing people say, "Wow, I never thought I would get to this point so quickly." Right at the end of my life, right? It just creeped up. Yes, and so then you hear the 90-year-old person say it, and you're like, "Wow, really?" And they're like, "Yeah, like it just went that way. Like I didn't think it would happen this quickly." And then the younger person, maybe someone in their 40s, to hear the same thing, right? Nobody thinks generally that this is going to happen the way it does. Right? So let's not wait till the last minute, because then we'll have all our Dharma books under our pillow, hoping that it just kind of the osmosis. That's how I tried to learn French when I was in middle school. I'll try not to do that. Purely keep the vows and samayas you have taken. Keep the one-day precepts on the new moon, full moon, and on the 8th day. Make use of your hands. Make 100 prostrations every day. Make use of your feet. Circumambulate holy objects. Make use of your tongue. Exert yourself in chanting and in recitation of the 6 syllables. To make use of your possessions, be diligent in gathering the accumulations. To make use of your mind, train in emptiness and compassion. Right? So he's basically telling us to to work it, right? Like use your whole self, use everything, use all of your senses, all of your abilities, right? Use everything that you can towards the practice of Dharma. Yeah, we don't need to be fascistic about it, but it's just, being, if we can have a heartfelt zeal or a heartfelt desire, a heartfelt excitement about Dharma practice, a heartfelt desire to want to know the nature of our mind, transform the nature of reality, open up into the direct experience of whatever it is that's arising. And that, and we really just focus on that. It doesn't matter who we are, where we are, what station, and this kind of social strata we happen to occupy. All of that stuff really doesn't matter. Right? If we can just focus on actualizing and modeling this, it will bring benefit. And he said, you should make use of this illusory body, which you have temporarily borrowed from the 4 elements, and, if necessary, be able to sacrifice it. Like a traveler who's well equipped with pack animals and provisions, when traveling on, you will have no misery. Right? So if you've done everything you could possibly do, then you will have no regrets. Right? If you're like, well, secretly, like, I'm not really going to practice. I'm going to put up a little image of me, turn off my camera, to make it look like I'm practicing all the time. And then right on my deathbed, I'll be like, oh shit, whoops, that's unfortunate. And he's like, don't be like that. We borrowed this body from the 4 elements. The 4 elements are going to come, tapping on our door and say, we want it back. And then we need to give it up. Right? Yeah. Right? So in one way, Karma Chagme is definitely following a very kind of classical way of beginning this kind of text. But at another level, it's as if he's reading our minds, and he's like, oh, Pay attention. I know what you did last night. I know what you're thinking. I know you don't want to be here. I know it's so easy to just want the creature comforts and not practice. Or you want the fame and not the humility. You want the this and not, some other thing. And the other reason why this is kind of important is a little bit like sometimes if anybody's read legal documents where the terms are just very explicitly given in the beginning, right? These terms are not, it's not this legal document we're signing with them, but it's like if we are clear about the terms around which we're practicing and what is important and what is beneficial to us, right from the beginning, then we can build something very solid, right? But if we don't kind of, if we're going to just kind of make it up as we go along, then there are going to be some flaws in the foundation, right? Which may prove to be an obstacle later or may not, right? But the question is to what extent do we want to take that risk? I will say it's really helpful, and now that COVID is over or whatever, and it's easier to do these things, I encourage people to do a little bit of hospice volunteer work or stuff like this, to really kind of get into the constancy of death, because there's nothing more sobering than seeing this constantly, or even just on a fairly regular basis, to kind of remember, oh, let me not waste this, right? And it doesn't mean don't stop and have fun and enjoy yourself, but let's not fall prey to the really weird notion that we're going to live forever, because that's so innate, at times, in what it is to be human, is to look away from the train wreck as it's happening. So I want to see if there are any questions, or if I should just move on to the next. This is all pretty chill stuff. But if there are questions, that's fine too. Okay. All right, great. I'll keep going.
Actually, could I just chime in for a question?
Of course.
I feel like curious about if you could speak a little more to the heartfelt zeal. So there's this, like, let's not wait to the last minute, do everything you can. And that sort of excites this like gas pedal. And then so it's just like a tight, relax, tight, relax, tight, relax. And there's this like soft thing. And I appreciated that you said heartfelt zeal, because it felt like the most like porous way to be urgent. But I'm wondering if you could speak to that in practicality a little more, or maybe that's all there is, and maybe I just am squirming inside of the gas brake kind of experience, and I want something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have this book here. I gave it to my mom. There's this book called, I think it's called A Day in the Life of a Buddhist Practitioner by Bokar Rinpoche. And it's kind of the same size as this. It's nice, and in it, there are all these great photographs of him. There's one of him brushing his teeth, right? And underneath is a quote. I'm paraphrasing, but it's may I scrub away all obscurations from body, speech, and mind. And then there's another where he's walking up those, I don't remember the term, those stairs that go up to airplanes, and he's walking up and someone took a picture, and then it says, may I always scale the heights of Dharma. And there's another one where he's about to hop in the shower, and it's may I wash away all negativity, right? So it's really at first I thought it was kind of cutesy, but then it's getting to know Bokar Rinpoche. That's exactly the way he was. is, you know, more or less, if there is some Dharma I can be practicing at any given moment, may I please practice it, you know? And just that for me, that's zeal, right? That's just like, you know, it can seem really like naive and Ned Flandersy, you know, in terms of like, you know, Heidi ho, neighbor, and like, you know, have you heard the good word, right? But there is such a beauty to that. Now, one of my teachers, Gyaltso Rinpoche, is like this in a very intense way. And so like when I went to go see him last year, like he's super kind and super generous to me when I'm there and will stop what he's doing to teach. But when I first got there, he was like, "Oh, you're here. I was going to go into retreat, but now you're here. You know, so I'll teach you." But I really, basically, I really wanted to go into retreat. And what he's always doing is like, you know, he's all he focuses on is Dharma, like Dharma, 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 Dharma. So it's like, oh, teaching you is Dharma. Okay, okay. Going over here is Dharma. Okay, we'll do this now. Like, oh, there's something that I need to circumambulate right now because that's Dharma. Let's go do that, you know? And just, you know, he is this kind of like very, very intense manifestation of this kind of like, you know, Dharma, 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 Dharma all the time. So for us to kind of feel into what feels right, because I mean, you know, some of this also has to do with the relationships we need to maintain too. Like we don't want to like freak everyone out, you know, around us. You know, many of us have like kind of interactions and relationships with people who might not practice Dharma, which is totally fine. And then we need to kind of titrate the way we are, so we're not dragging everyone around with us where we go. But just like that, you know, my root teacher told me before she died, she was like, you know, in the future, when you're looking for teachers, look for teachers that are childlike in their behavior in that particular way, right? So it's like focus, 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 like a kid, like one of my sons, Marcus, my youngest one, is focused on dessert all the time. You know, if he just changed, you know, dessert out for Dharma, he'd be enlightened, you know. Instead, he just has lots of cavities all the time. And so like just like that single pointed fun like focus that's, you know, hopefully joyful too, right? And we don't want to be like overly intense, you know. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing is just like finding in ourselves that balance, you know. Yeah, and you know, whatever the balance is, it's yours and it's fine. It's totally good, you know. So let's see. This one's a little long, but we can start it. So it is thinking of impermanence, cause and effect. So this is song 3, and Karma Chagme says, Kema kihu atsamana ang. When this vessel-like world disintegrates, it will be destroyed by fire and water. Years are also impermanent. As the year cycle gradually turns, the months and seasons, heat and cold, and the half-yearly cycles alternate while the hours dwindle away with the rising and setting of the sun and moon. Right? And so he's beginning to talk about impermanence. Everything, this world, and Lord knows we're really beginning to see this now, is impermanent, right? It's out of whack. It's not going to last forever. And we are certainly not helping the situation. Right? And even if it's just the environmental crisis, the human crisis, the constancy of human crisis and human violence is also a major threat, right? So, you know, things have changed a little bit since Karma Chagme's time, but not so much. I don't think humans have really changed that much since the 1600s. You know, still fighting over, you know, the same things and, you know, being unjust in the same ways. But time is passing, seasons are passing, right? It's fall now, it's slowly getting colder, except down in New Zealand, it's slowly getting warmer. All of the constant shift, you know, all of this is happening. The contents, sentient beings who inhabit the world are born, grow old, fall sick, and die. The changes of impermanence are like ripples on water. It is impossible among all compounded things to find even one that will remain forever. The end result of birth is death. The end result of rising is falling. The end result of youth is deterioration, and the end result of gathering is depletion. The end result of meeting is parting. These one cannot avoid. And so remaining aware and rooted in a profound understanding of the impermanence of things is beneficial, and we'll get into the benefit, but we cannot find anything that has lasted forever. So even that one of these days where maybe there's nothing to do and we're like, oh, what a long day, this feels so great, it's over before you know it. This life over before we know it. This class over before we know it. Everything over before we know it. It's all going it's all gonna die. Sorry if I'm giggling about it. The perfect Buddha, the Pratyekajinas, the Arhats, and all the ones who have attained the supreme and common cities must all in the end leave their bodies behind. Where is there someone who is superior to them? Since even Brahma, Indra, and the universal monarch, the king of half of the world, as well as all the great kings of India, Tibet, Mongolia, and so forth, all had to die. How can there be any certainty as to the time of death for ungifted commoners? Right? We are all going to die. Everybody is, no matter how high your station is, no matter how low your station is. Even gods die. This is part of the suffering of the gods. That they have everything they could possibly want, and they still are going to die. There are 400. Well, it's 400, and then sometimes they say 404, so that's why I pause. There are 400 kinds of sickness, and 100,000 types of obstacles, and innumerable dangers to life and limb. Like a flame in a hurricane, there is no certainty as to when you will pass away. Like a criminal being led to the scaffold, you approach death with each passing year, month, and day. One day you will meet Yama, the Lord of Death. When medicine, protection, and the power of healing ceremonies have failed, there will come a day when you will become a corpse. Just like the setting sun approaching mountaintops, there will come a day when your death cannot be postponed. So, this is inevitable. No matter how much we bargain, no matter how good our insurance policy is, want to get that like experimental treatment from Memorial Sloan Kettering or some other, specialty hospital. Even then, you will die at some point. No matter how good you look, you're still gonna die. Without power to take along your relatives and attendants, there will come a day when you must depart alone. You may have great wealth, but no freedom to take along even one day's provisions. Likewise, there will come a day when you must leave empty-handed. Right? So for all of us, my poor family who has all these books that they're going to be like, what in the world are we going to do with all this stuff? Right? I can't bring those with me. Can't even download them into Dharmakaya and take them with me into the Pure Land. Right? So even that, everything we've accumulated, right? All of Eric's fabulous wealth, all has to be left alone, left behind. Rodrigo's Dharma Kingdom in Mexico has to be given up. All of this. So I'm gonna kind of read through this one if it's okay. We're gonna go a little over time. Hopefully that's okay. Roaming aimlessly alone through unknown lands, there will come a time when there is no certainty as to your destination. Your pains and agony may be great, but there will be no way to share it with others. There will come a time when you will undergo difficulties. Right, so this actually has to do with the beginning portion of the Bardo. Right, so post-death, then there you are, this disembodied consciousness who is beginning to attenuate itself to the Bardo experience, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in this unusual place, and you may even see your loved ones and say, hey, don't touch my books. Don't give them away, don't sell them. Save them for my reincarnation. And they're not listening, right? They're throwing them away, and then all this anguish. Oh my God, that's a commentary on this practice, blah, blah, blah. Right. So all of the stuff, right? And this might sound, a little fanciful, but I have had this experience in dark retreat experience of being convinced that I had died, and then seeing my wife and kids from afar and not being able to communicate to them, and it was very hard. It was very, very disconcerting for a moment, and then everything shifted. But so this, I trust 100%. I don't trust the suffering 100%. I trust the possibility of this difficult kind of experience arising, like 100%. Without recognizing the dissolution stages or the luminosities of manifestation and increase. Again, this is the Bardo. There will come a time when you are at a loss about what to do. When sounds, colors, and lights in the peaceful and wrathful deities dawn, an evil person will feel alone, as if surrounded by a whole army. There will come a time of tremendous panic, fear, and terror. And so this can happen as well. So, after this experience of your consciousness kind of moving on, the experience of seeing all of the Bardo deities coming, wrathful, semi-wrathful, and peaceful. And if you know what they are, and you know what to do, and you know how to practice, it's not bad, right? You're able to behold them and experience them as a reflection of one's own innate wisdom. But if you don't know what they are, then you become very reactive, right? So that which appears intense and terrifying makes us recoil the same way we would recoil now if someone came and tried to scare us or shock us, or some very seductive yogini came, or yogi, depending on what our interests are, and then we're like, ooh, check them out, and then all of a sudden this starts leading us into this whole other kind of experience, right? Or semi-wrathful, they're kind of hot and cold, a little hard to protect, right? So all of these experiences have been carried off by the terrifying and fearsome messengers of Yama. Your inherent god and demon will reveal your virtues and evil deeds. Lying will not help, as they will be evident in the mirror and the register. There will come a time when you will regret your past misdeeds. You may desire some merit, but at this time there is nowhere to buy or borrow it. The Lord of Death will be separating the white from the black. Right? And so this is referring to, positive actions and negative actions. So this is kind of like being judged. If you want to be without regrets at that time and still don't practice right now, you're fooling yourself, being silly and senseless. Right? So, again, he's like, don't wait for the last minute until you're right in the presence of the Lord of Death and say, but, wait a minute. Try to pull out a credit card and be like, do you take credit cards? Like, I need some merit right now. Or lying. That wasn't me who did that. That was Eric. No, that's not going to help because they know, right? At present, you can't even bear the touch of a fire spark, but the flames of the flames of hell are 7 times hotter than the fires of this world. How will your mind be able to bear having to be boiled and burned for aeons without even being able to die? Right? So this, this we need to ask ourselves from time to time. I ask my kids all the time, when they're not doing their chores, so again, this kind of suffering caused by the sense of judgment, the sense of, at the very least, even if it's just self-torment. Okay. So then Karma Chagme goes on to say, when you cannot bear just wearing thin clothing for even a single winter's day, what do you do when, without being able to die, you are enclosed within thin ice without clothes, freezing for aeons, like being in a cold hell. Right? So the first was a hot hell. And he says, when you keep fasting silence right now, you feel completely dizzy. Later on, for thousands of years, without hearing even the words food and drink, what will you do at that time? You are not even able to die. At present, if someone calls you old dog, you pull out your knife. But what will you do if you're actually reborn as a dog? Right now, it is enough to flee from an enemy or an army. But what will you do if you were born in the realm of the demigods? At present, you feel despair at the slightest degradation, but the mystery of a fallen God, the misery of a fallen God is unbearable. The sufferings of the three lower realms are intolerable. The pleasures of gods and humans are impermanent and totally transient. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are like ripples on water. The ocean of samsaric misery is deep. Since one fears this endless terror without any chance for escape, one should shun misdeeds as if they were poison, and follow these sacred teachings which bring benefit as if they were the antidote. Venerate the three jewels, the supreme protection. If you don't understand the meaning of what I have explained here, look then to these examples which are obvious. Even when the present kings assemble their armies, it is hard for them to gather more than 30,000. Also, it is rare to find more than 300,000 human beings in one vassal kingdom. The number of insects in summertime on just one mountain slope far surpasses the amount of humans in the domain of a great king. Likewise, the number of ants in a single anthill is higher than all of the troops of a great ruler. To see whether or not a human form is hard to find, think of the previous example. And actually, this is true with respect to ants. So I was reading, this came out within the past year. I think there are more ants than any other being on the planet. In fact, if the if the ants rose up, they could take over the world. Right. So, Karma Chagme was onto something. He was like, we think, of course we think we're the best, right? Oh, look what I can do. Look at all this stuff. Look, I can draw, I can write, I can, I can act like this. I can play music. I can do all this stuff. I can meditate. Right. But there are more insects than there are humans. There are more animals than there are humans, all of us. Right. So this is, this coming back to how rare this moment is, right? And how we assume, yeah, sure, next time totally gonna be a human. That's gonna be great, or to be a god, not particularly great, right? Or a demigod. All this fighting, all this warring, etc. Consider the equally strong brothers from the same parents. Some are rich and some are poor, and some destitute. Some have short lives, sickness, and a lot of misery. Some are rarely sick and have a long life and are mostly happy, although they are alike in having obtained a precious human form. Some are powerful and others are destitute. Some are rich and others are starving and desolate. This is not because some are strong and others are weak, some clever and some dumb. Examine this to see that it results from the karma of past lives. All human beings, since the beginning of the aeon until this day, feared death, but still found no way to avoid it. Since not even a single person is left behind, try and estimate how many of your acquaintances have died. They died last year, and this year more will die. You are also not beyond this in the slightest. We may die. Everyone knows that there is death, and one needs dharma when it happens. Yet we fool ourselves by thinking there's plenty of time. Nowadays, it is said that lifespan is about 40 years, right? So this was, a long time ago. Try and think, reflecting on how many people have died who are the same age or younger than yourself. Still, we think we won't die right away. we use our time on defeating enemies, taking care of relatives, making preparations, and taking pleasure in misdeeds. Without fulfilling our plans, we're all taken away by the Lord of Death. Realize that you are also not exempt from this, and practice the perfect Dharma. The method for tending to practice, for entering the Dharma, and for reaching perfection in Dharma practice is the pure teaching on sincerely thinking of death. If you don't take the thought of death to heart, your Dharma practice will only stray into self-aggrandizement and the performance of rituals for pay. There is therefore a profound teaching to take to heart in the thought of death. Think of this 3 times every single day. And so we'll pause here. It's very uplifting spot. And the homework is to think about death. And so if you can, and I don't mean this literally necessarily, but begin, right? Begin to think about death. Think about it more. Try to find somebody who has never died. Try to get curious about when you think you will die and what impact that has. If you think, oh, I'll die when I'm in my 80s, right? Is that true? How can we have a relationship to this without burning up into some terrible despair? So I will pause here and dedicate the merit to all sentient beings who are going to die. May every single sentient being who is boxed in by death, may they be able to experience their mind as vast, open, spacious liberation. May all beings who are bound by death dedicate their time here, wherever they are, in any realm and in every realm, in developing in open, loving zeal and passion for practice. May everything we do become practice. And may every action based on this help bring benefit for all sentient beings. So take care of yourselves, everyone, and thank you for sticking around a little bit later. And I'll see you next week. Be well. Bye-bye.